turn 7 then, and the weather outside's turned for the worse, I'm afraid, so I apologise if the lighting gets a bit poor. Roll for initiative first of all, and it has definitely switched, which you can tell from the way the game is playing out, but the Russians now have 2 initiative dice because they've got 5 units on the table. The Chechens have got 6 units on the table, so they get 3 dice for that. They outnumber the Russians, so they get an extra dice for that, and they get an extra dice for having had the initiative last turn. So that's going to be 5 dice to 2 in favour of the Chechens. Failure there, and there, and there. Oh, Chechens just manage it. 2 dice to 1, so the Chechens retain the initiative. Next up, first aid checks. So there are 4 to check there. So we roll 4d6. I'll do that in this space here. Right, so, ones mean dead. So there are 3 dead and 1 serious wound there. Right, now I have to be a little bit kind of flexible in how I apportion all these wounds. There is definitely 1 serious wound, so that goes down as a red dice with a 1 on it. Now, if you suffer a serious wound, a bit like that group over there did earlier, it means that the unit can only react to the enemy firing on them for the rest of the next turn, for the rest of turn 7. It's more serious, in fact, having a serious wound than having a casualty, a fatality, because if you have a fatality you test to see if that's what happens, but when you have a serious wound you definitely can only react for the next turn, so there's no need to test now for those 3 dead, because we know with the serious casualty they're going to have to sit there and react. So I've got 3 figures to take off the table, so what I'm going to do is remove I think we'll get rid of the RPG and 2 of the riflemen, and we'll say that those 3 were 3 that were lightly wounded, which means there is still 1 who is lightly wounded. So one of these 2 characters is lightly wounded and the other one is seriously wounded. We don't have to specify which is which, and we can take that off. Next up, the anti-tank crew. I've got 2 wounds there that need to be tested for. 4 and a 5, they are both serious wounds, so they have 2 serious wounds now, and that means again that this unit can only react for the next turn, for turn 7. And what I'm going to say for this one is that there is a 2 in 3 chance that the lightly wounded figure is now seriously wounded. So I'm going to roll a d6. If I roll 1 to 4, I'm going to take the blue dice off and replace it with a red dice, and if it's 5 or 6 I'll leave it on. So it's 1, so that's going to come off, and I'm going to put a red dice with 2 wounds, and they're stuck there now for turn 7. And then finally, on the Russian side, they're doing appallingly now. There's the 1 casualty over here, and that's a 5, so that's another serious wound. So there's the dice, same thing again for them. They have to stay there and can only react to enemy fire for turn 7, so the rescue attempt on the tank crew here has really stalled now, And that's the Russian first aid. So now we've got to do the Chechen first aid, and their injuries are both over here. So there's one there. 2 is another light wound, so I'm going to put that 2 up to 3. I'm being fairly kind of loose with the rules here. I mean, it's possible that the light wound was on on the same figure has already got one, but I'm going to put that up to 3. Take that off, and then we've got 2 over here. So 2d6 and 2 light wounds, so that gets replaced with a blue with a 2 on it. Right, so there's the blue 2, and next thing is to determine on the Chechen side who is going to be on overwatch. So I'm going to put this unit on the top floor here on overwatch because they're in a good central position high up. They can see down on any on a lot of the Russian force, in fact on all of it, and just that one. So now it's up to me to start to move the initiative units, and I'm going to start by this, this unit here. I'm going to make a rapid move so that they're in front of those barrels and chests and so on. They won't have reached the tank crew, but they will be able to in the next turn. Right, so there they are, and I've also moved this unit here from the wall there. They've made a rapid advance round to here. They're a little bit more in the open there, but I want them to block off any further attempts from these Russians who can't see them because this curb, if you remember, I specified the whole template as high terrain. It just makes it a little bit simpler than saying which part of this can they see over. So the whole thing is high terrain, so they're out of sight, so they can't react to this movement. But if the Russians do try and make another attempt, they've got to come through a minefield and then face fire from this unit here. Okay, and then the unit on the ground floor there is going to fire at that unit there, which is now only composed of 2 figures, and the 2 figures are going to react to try and fire back, which means that the overwatch unit up above is going to try and preempt that reaction and fire on them as well. Okay, so the first thing to do is the overwatch reaction with the Russian unit, and so I can add 1 to the Chechen dice, the yellow dice. Right, so the Russians actually win that 8-7, which means the overwatch unit falls off overwatch. And the other thing is the reaction test between the Chechen unit and the ground floor firing on the Russian unit, and the Russians win that as well. So the Russians are going to fire first of all on the ground floor unit, then the ground floor unit is going to fire back, and then the overwatch unit can fire at the end of that exchange if there's any Russian figures left. So the Russians start off with 2 figures. I beg your pardon, no they don't. One of them is seriously wounded. Light wounds can contribute to the firefight, but serious wounds can't. So they start off with 1 combat effective figure and nothing else. They're not in optimum range, anything like that. So the Chechens counter that with 1 dice as their base defence. They are behind solid cover. There's intervening cover that the fire is going across, and they can take advantage of the terrain to put themselves in cover as well. So they can match the 4 with that, so the Russian unit doesn't hit them. Then they get to fire back, So they start off with 6 figures. Yeah, 6 figures. They have an RPG, they have a support weapon, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The Russians have a solitary figure. He is wearing body armour. He's in solid cover and he's taking advantage of the terrain, and that's everything. Right, the Russians haven't managed to roll anything. All those are below 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fails for the Russians, but they had got 4 hits. There's only 2 figures in the unit, so you can't have any overkill, so the Russian unit is wiped out, so there's no point in the Overwatch unit firing at them. So we just put a 2 on there to add to their misery, and there's no point in taking a morale test because they're stuck there now until another friendly unit can reach them and do some first aid on them. Right, the sniper is going to take a shot at the anti-tank gun here. And that does mean, oh no, they can't react because the sniper is stealthy, so he can't be seen. So we'll see if the sniper can wipe out this unit altogether. Right, so the sniper is a single figure within optimum range, so he gets 2 dice. The Russian tank team have got 2 serious wounds, so they've only got 1 combat effective figure now. They're in solid cover, wearing body armour and taking advantage of the terrain, so they get 4 dice against the sniper's 2. So they've successfully defended themselves. So the unit on the ground floor then will try and do the same thing. They're going to shoot at the crew. Right, this time the Russians can take a reaction test to see if they can preempt the fire, because the Chechen unit isn't stealthy, isn't hidden. Both fail, so as the Chechens have the initiative, they fire first. So they only have 2 light wounds in the unit, so they have 6 combat effectives. They get 2 dice for an RPG, they get 1 dice for a support weapon, and that's it. So the Russians only have 1 figure with body armour, behind solid cover and taking advantage of the terrain in cover. Remove all the failed rolls, anything below a 4, and we're left with a 5 and a 4 on the Russian side. The 5 can match the 5, but nothing can match any of those, so again you can't have overkill, so 3 figures, 3 injuries. So again, this unit here is now wiped out, so is hopeless until something can reach it and do a first aid check on it. So it's really looking like the end of the game for the Russians, but we'll carry on and see what happens to the tank crew. Right, I think that is everything from the the Chechen point of view. So now the Russians have to make their mind up what they're going to try and do. I think this unit here is going to make a tactical move so it's moved 6 inches, so it will be within optimum range of that building there, and then they're going to fire on the Chechens in the lower floor. Right, so the Russians are allowed to get within 8 inches, but then the Chechens are now able to take a reaction test to see who fires first out of them. The Overwatch unit can't react because it fell off of Overwatch, so it's only the unit on the ground floor. So it's just a round of fire between these two. Chechens win it, so they fire first. So they have a unit of 6 figures, of which 3 have light wounds, so they're still combat effective. They have an RPG. They have a support weapon. They lose a dice for having already had a round of fire this turn. And that's it. The Russians have 5 figures, but 1 has a serious wound, so therefore he doesn't contribute to the combat, so they only have a base defense of 4. They are wearing body armour. They're not behind any kind of cover, so they can only take advantage of what little cover there is on the road and so on, so they get 1 for that, being in cover, and that's all they get. Oh, and the the Chechens get another 1 for being now within optimum range. Take away all the ones below 4. And the Chechens got 7, a 6 and 3 5s. And so the Russian 4 there doesn't match any of them, it's not any use. 5 can match the 5, 8 can match a 7, so they take 3 hits. Meaning with the serious wound now they're down to 1 combat effective figure, who rolls for morale and fails it, so they are pinned there now, so they can't fire back, and they have to withdraw into cover of some kind. So they have 3 more wounds. They can move back over this hedge, so they're behind the cover of the hedge. And lo and behold, they've walked into a minefield now, so they immediately have to take a troop quality test to see if they suffer any injuries from the minefield. Right, so they're testing to see if they've taken any casualties in the minefield by rolling a troop quality dice, and because they're pinned, they were troop quality D8, but that now drops to a D6, so they've got to get 4 or better on a D6, which they do, so they've survived the minefield for the time being. Right, and finally there's this unit here that haven't done anything this turn, so they're allowed to move or fire. It's difficult. There's no point in them trying to do first aid, move to this group here, or back to this one here, because even if they manage to perform first aid on them, both the units are going to be down to 1 effective fighting figure, which means they're kind of out of the combat really anyway. So they've got an option of either trying to get across and helping rescue the tank crew, or just exchanging fire with that group there. So I think I'm going to move them into this template, and then they're going to fire at that group there. So there they are, they've moved into the template, which means they're now in solid cover, and they're going to fire at the Chechen unit in the building there. The Chechens can react, so there's now a reaction test to see who fires first. and it's a draw, which means the Chechens fire first because they are the initiative side. So there are 6 figures. Yeah. There's 6 figures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They've got an RPG, a support weapon. I think they've fired at least once this turn. Can't remember now. I'm going to take 2 off because the Russians are having such a hard time. I think they've fired twice this turn. And that's it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. There are 6 figures in the Russian unit. They are wearing body armour, they're in solid cover, and they can take advantage of the terrain to be in cover as well. Take away the fails. Right, there are 2 8s there, 2 7s, a 6, a 5 and a 4. And the Russians have got 1 8, can match that, 1 7 that can match that, 6 can match that, 5 can match that, and all the 6 can do is match the 4, can't match the 7 or 8, so the Russians have taken 2 casualties. So they roll for morale. Oh, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minus the 2 casualties, so they roll 4 dice, and they pass with all of them. So they pass their morale. So they now have, with the 2 casualties, they now have 4 combat effective figures. They have a support weapon there, an SAW, gives them 1 extra dice. They have a heavy support weapon as well, which would give them 3 dice normally, but because they've made a tactical move, they lose 2 of those dice. So they just get 1 for that. I believe that's everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is the same as the number of Chechens in the unit. So they start with a base defence of 6. They're behind solid cover. They are able to take advantage of the cover as well. And that's everything. Take away everything that's not, I'm going to call that a 3. Right, so the Russians have scored 7, 6 and 5, and the Chechens have got 2 8s there, which cuts out the 7 and the 6, and the 6 cuts out the 5, so no hits on the Chechens. Right, the Chechens didn't suffer any casualties, but they were fired upon by a heavy support weapon, which is deemed to be an intimidating weapon, so they have to take a morale for that. So they have 6 figures rolling D10s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because they've got D10 morale. Fail, pass, 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 fail. So 4 to 2, they pass. And that is the end of turn 7. I think we can safely say that the Russians don't have a chance of rescuing these tank crew now, but I shall carry on maybe just for one more turn, just to show you what happens when the tank crew are captured and so on. So I'll play it, but I'll kind of cut a few corners from now on, I think, just to get to the end of the game. Right, so for turn 8, no surprise that the Chechens retain the initiative, and health check wise this unit suffered 2 serious injuries, so they are stuck there for the remainder of this turn. This unit here had 1 dead, but they passed their troop quality check, so they can move on, and 1 light wound, so they can do something. So I think I'm going to call this unit here the Overwatch unit, so that if these Russians do decide to move back around this corner in their part of the turn, the Overwatch unit can still react and shoot at them. And I'm going to start by moving these units. I'm going to say that this unit now moves over the barricade and takes the Russian tank crew prisoner. Now I'm not sure when you would do the first aid check on them, whether it would be in the next turn or now. I think it's probably sensible to do it in the next turn during the first aid phase. So at the moment they have just moved over and taken them prisoner. And the next thing is that this unit here is going to fire at that unit there. So there'll be a reaction test to see who fires first. And it's the Chechens. So they have 6 figures, an RPG, a support weapon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 dice. Because the Russians suffered 1 casualty, fatality, they've now only got 5 figures in that unit. So they start with 5, they've got body armour, they're in cover, and they're behind cover. Okay, so the Chechens got 8, 2 5s and a 4. The Russians have got 4 6s and a 5, so they can counter everything below the 8, but that still means that there's 1 hit on them, so they have to throw for morale. So they've now got 4 combat effectives, and they pass the morale. The Russians now get to fire back, so they're down to 4 effectives. They haven't moved this guy, so their heavy support weapon will add 3 to the dice roll, and they've also got a SAW, a support weapon. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 6 figures in the Chechen unit in the building, so they start with a base defence of 6. They're in solid cover, and they're taking advantage of the cover. And that's it. Oh, lots of low numbers on the Chechen roll there. And that. Right, so the Russians have rolled 7, 8, 7, 5 and 2 4s, so that will match that. Oh no, hang on, we'll do it. That will match that, and that will match that. I had 2 matches there, so there are 3 that hit, 3 hits. And that means that the Chechens are down to 3 combat effectives, so they have to roll for morale using D10s. And they pass, and they have to do it again because they're fired at by an intimidating weapon, and they pass again. Right, so I put a white microdice with 3 there, and a white microdice with 1 there, and now this unit at the top here is going to open fire on that unit there. They're basically going to get clobbered by everything now, this Russian unit. So again, there'll be a reaction test to see who fires first. Right, I've just rolled that. This time it's the Russians win, so the Russians will get to fire first. So they're down to 4 combat effectives. they're firing a heavy support weapon, a saw, and they've already had one round of fire, so they lose one dice. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They had 6 figures in the Russian unit, so they start with 6. They're behind cover and they're taking advantage of the cover. That means that the Russians have got an 8 and a 4, the 8's matched against that, there's another 8 there. So no hits on the Chechens, but they are being shot at by an intimidating weapon. So there's 6 figures in the unit, so they roll 6 morale dice. They're all passes apart from that one, so they pass the morale check. Now they get to fire back, so they're rolling 6 dice for 6 figures. They've got an RPG, which is 2, and a support weapon is 1. So the Russians start with 4 combat effectives. They're in solid cover, they've got body armour, and they're in cover. Good roll from the Chechens. 2, 2 8s, 3 6s and a 5. So the 7 can counter the 6. And those 2 6s can counter those 2 6s, meaning there are 3 hits on the Russian unit. So they have to take a morale test, and they're down to 1 effective figure. And they pass it. So I put this white micro dice up to 4 now, and there's still another unit in there. So I was debating whether they were going to fire on these guys or these guys, but I think they definitely want to try and wipe this unit out as well. So a reaction test again, see who fires first. It's the Russians this time. So they've got single figure, so I'm going to obviously nominate that's the one figure, but I'm going to nominate the figure that's carrying the heavy support weapon to carry on, so he adds 3 dice to the mix, and that's all they can do. There are 6 figures in the Russian unit, I think, just check that. On the ground floor. Yep. So they can roll 4 as their base defence. They get 1 for being in cover, 1 for being behind 1 for being behind solid cover, 1 for taking advantage of the cover as trained troops. Get rid of all the 1s, 2s and 3s. And we're left with 2 4s from the Russians, and an 8, 7 and 6 that easily match it. So no hits, but they have to take a morale check using D10s because they're fired on by a heavy support weapon. Right, there's 3 fails there, so they are pinned, and that means that they have to move into cover, but they are already. And they can react to being fired upon, so they can return the fire. But they go down a troop quality, so they go down from D8 to D6, that's it. Right, so there are 6 figures, so they're now rolling D6s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a rocket propelled grenade, gives them 2. A support weapon gives them another 1, an SAW, and that's their lot. So they're firing on a unit that now only has 1 effective combat figure, who is wearing body armour and is behind solid cover and is able to take advantage of the cover. So So it's going to be 8, no, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 d6s versus 4 d8s. Take away all the 1s, 2s and 3s. There's a lot of 6s there, that looks good. Right, so you only need the 1 hit, so the Russians can't match any of those 6s, so it's overkill, so they are wiped out now. So they don't have to throw for morale because they are wiped out. So we put that up to 5. If I can find it, there we are. And then that effectively is the end of the Russian attack over this side because all these units are wiped out. So there's no one to come to their rescue and give them first aid. So that is the end of the the Chechen part of the turn. So I'm now going to say that these guys here are going to make one last desperate effort to make a rapid move through the minefield to attack those guys there in the hope of reaching the captured tank crew. So the first thing they do is they make a troop quality check going through the minefield, and because they're making a rapid movement they deduct 1 from the throw. So they fail it. So they suffer a 3 firepower attack from the minefield. So they're allowed a base defence of 3. They're wearing body armour and they're able to take advantage of any cover that the terrain gives them. Oh, I missed that. Take away the fails. So there's a 7 and a 4, 7's there and the 4's there, so they're fine, so they can now move forward. So they get to here, and the Overwatch unit can now attempt to preempt that move and shoot at them. So they take a reaction test, and the Russian unit can fire back, so it's a matter of who fires first according to the reaction test, and the Overwatch unit, because they're on Overwatch, get a +1 to their dice roll. Right, the Russians still win because +4 + 1 is 5. So the Russians are making one last gallant attempt. There are 5 effective figures because 1 has a serious wound. Oh yeah, that's something else I didn't do, is they need to roll against their troop quality to make sure they can move rapidly. Let's do that now. And they can, yeah, so they're alright. Right, so they've got 5 figures. The heavy support weapon can't fire because they moved rapidly. So they've got a support weapon there that can fire, gives them 1 extra dice. They are now within optimum range, and they lose a dice because they moved rapidly. And that's it. Right, so they start off with 6. There are also 6 figures in the Chechen unit. They gain a dice because a rapidly moving unit is easier to hit because they're not taking such care at taking cover. They gain another dice. I've gone a bit mad here. Yeah, sorry, they're not firing at them, are they? Right, so they have 6 as their basic defence. They have 1 dice because they are able to take advantage of the cover, and that is everything actually because they're not behind any sort of cover. Right, the Russians are making an absolutely heroic last charge. They've got 4 8s and a 7, so that can match that. Nothing else can match, so they've got 4 hits on the poor old Chechen unit. The tank crew might be rescued yet. Right, so 4 hits means that they're down to 2 combat effectives. And they have to roll 2 dice for morale, which they fail, so they are now pinned, which means they have to move back into cover. Right, so there they are. 4 injuries to be determined, and they're back. They've moved back behind this solid cover here, and so that means that their line of sight is blocked, so they can't fire back at the Russian attackers. So there's a sudden storming charge, last desperate charge, so try and get to any of these tank crew who might still be left alive and get them out of this situation. So that is the end of turn 8, so we're now on to turn 9. Turn 9 then, and the Russian attack over this side has just come to a complete standstill. All these units wiped out. I've already rolled for initiative, and no surprise, the Chechens have it again. And it's now time to do the first aid checks. So there is a unit down here that can check. They have 3 to roll. So roll 3 d6s. 2 6s, so they're very lucky there. 2 of those stand up and walk away, get away with it, but there is 1 serious wound there. And that means that that unit can only react to enemy fire this turn, so it's got to sit there for turn 9. And over here we've got this unit that got mauled by the sudden late charge of the Russians, so they've got 4 injuries to test for. That one is dead, and there is a light wound and 2 serious wounds, so that's not good. So the 2 serious wounds mean that the unit can only react to enemy fire this turn, it can't do anything. Right, so I've put a red 2 and a blue 1 there to signify 2 serious wounds, 1 light wound, and I've removed 1 of the figures, so there are now 5 figures in the unit. So now we're on to the interesting bit. These tank crew have now been taken prisoner, so we can do a first aid check to see how many of them are actually still alive or what kind of wounds they have. 2 light wounds, 2 serious wounds, so they already had 3 light wounds on them. So I'm going to say that 2 of them have serious wounds and 2 of them have light wounds, and that's the whole 4. Right, so I put a 2 red, 2 blue, and the first action that the Chechen side are going to take then is to attempt to move them off towards their table edge. Now they can move at rapid speed, but only if they pass a troop quality test, otherwise they've got to move at 6 inches. Oh, and in fact, because they're crossing the barrier, they can only move at 6 inches for this turn, so I'm going to move them 6 inches so they're behind this wall and out of sight of the Russian players. Alright, so there they are. This unit can't do anything this go, other than react to Russian fire, and there's a unit over there that can't do anything, but the rest of the Chechen units, I'm just going to move towards this side of the table edge now, so I'll do that next. When I came around here, I've changed my mind. What I'm going to do, this unit can't do anything, but the sniper has a line of sight on that unit, as does that unit and this unit, so all these 3 are going to take shots at that guy there, starting with the sniper, who can't be preempted because he's stealthy. So the sniper is a single figure and is within optimum range, which means that the Russian unit get a basic defence of 2, they are behind cover, they are wearing body armour, and they are able to take advantage of the cover through their training, so they are in cover. There's a fail there, and they've got an 8 which the Russians can't match, so 1 casualty on the Russians, which means they're now down to 4 combat effectives, so they take a morale test, which they pass. Okay, so they've got 1 white dice there at the moment, or 1 facing on the white dice, so the next Chechen unit, there's 2 in the building, 1 on each floor, so it doesn't matter, we'll start with the upper one. They're going to open fire on these guys, and in this case the Russians can react, so there's a Russian test to see who fires first. Chechens win. So the Chechen unit has 6 figures. It has an RPG and a support weapon, and that's it. The Russians are now down to 3 effectives. They're wearing body armour, they're in cover and behind cover. They're outside of optimum range now then, just had a quick look, they're outside of 8 inches. Right, not a very good throw from the Chechen point of view. 7, 6, 6 and 2 5s, so that 7 and that 7 match up. That's 7 and that's 6 will can match up. That's 6 and that's 6 will match up. Oh, there's an 8 there. That'll easily cancel that. But there are 2 4s that can't match the 5. So that means there's 1 hit on the Russian player. So that means he's now down to, or the Russian unit, he's now down to, oh, you know what, I've been doing this totally wrong. I'll show you why. Just put that up to 2, but notice there's 3 serious wounds there. So that means that that unit is now wiped out. I thought for some reason I thought there was only 1 serious wound there. So that unit is now wiped out and can't reply, can't return fire, can't do anything for the rest of the game. So the Russians are now just down to these guys here. Right, so the Chechen player has finished activating his units, so now the Russians have a unit here that hasn't been activated or reacted this turn, so it can now be activated. So towards the end of the game I'm going to show you how close assault works. They're going to try and close with the enemy and fight hand-to-hand melee. So you can do that if you are within rapid movement distance, 12 inches of the enemy, which they are. There's a number of complicating factors though. One is there's a serious injury there though, so they are going to have to first of all roll to see if they can move rapidly, and then they're going to have to make another troop quality test to see if they can close assault, and if they pass that, a third to see if they suffer any injuries as they go through the minefield. So we've got 3 checks to make first of all before they can do this. Okay, first test to see if they can move rapidly. Yes. Second test to see if they can make a close assault. Yes. Third test to see if they get out of the minefield okay. Yes. Right, so they can now make a close assault, so the Chechens now have to make a troop quality test to see if they can stand the close assault. No. Right, I'll just check in the rules what happens now. Right, according to the rules, had it passed the test, it could have fired at the enemy as they closed. and then fought a hand-to-hand battle. So now it can't do that. So it's either got the option of fleeing and being pinned at the end of the flee, or the end of the flight rather, or standing and fighting hand-to-hand battle without the ability of defensive fire. So I'm going to move them into hand-to-hand combat, move these guys into hand-to-hand combat, just to give you an example of how hand-to-hand combat works, because it's quite bloody. Right, so how it works is, starting with the assaulting player, they make an attack on the defending unit, and the defending unit cannot claim cover other than body armour, and the assaulting unit doesn't get any bonuses for any support weapons or anything like that. They're not using them in close proximity. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 figures in the Russian unit, but I forgot to bring this up here. This is a serious wound on one of them, so they have 5 combat effective figures in the unit. Right, so the Russian unit has 5 figures. Can't claim anything else, can't claim optimum range, support weapons, so it's just 5. And the Chechen unit, they're all intermingled now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have 5 as well. Failed. Oh, the Russians haven't done well. So the Russians have got a 7, which the Chechens can match. So no casualties from the Chechen point of view. So the Chechens have 5 figures, and the Russians have 5. They have 6 figures, but one of them is seriously wounded, so they have 5 combatants, but they also are wearing body armour, which they can claim. This fight, by the way, goes on until one unit is wiped out or surrenders, so we're just going to carry on like this until the fight is resolved. Right, the Chechens have scored 2 7s and a 6, and only 1 7 can resolve that, which means they've got 2 hits. So they've got 2 hits on the Russians, and the Russians are therefore down to 3 combat effectives, and they have to take a morale test. If they fail, which they have done, their morale now goes down to D6. If it goes down below D6, then they surrender. Sorry, I'm going to start this fight again, because I again had missed the point that the Chechens as well have got 2 seriously wounded figures there, so I'm going to start the fight again. Right, starting with the Russian attack, they've got 6 figures, but one of them is seriously wounded, so they've got 5. The Chechens have got 5 figures, but 2 of them are seriously wounded, so they have a base of 3. Failed. It's only wise I do this because they were beginning to prevail and they were obviously the weaker side, and I was getting it wrong. So they've got a 6 there against that 6 there, which means the Russians have wiped them out. Yeah, because they've got four injuries and they've already got 2 seriously wounded. So that means that they are captured or surrendered to the Russians. So that Russian unit is doing sterling work, really desperate to get those prisoners rescued. Okay, now there are 5 figures in that Chechen unit. What you do once they're wiped out in close assault is you roll a d6 for each figure. Any 1 means that that figure is captured. Anything else, you assume that they were killed in the fighting. So I'm going to roll 5d6. And there's 1 person captured and the other 4 are killed. And that's a bit of an inconvenience, because it means that the Russians now have to cart that prisoner around with them, which is going to slow them down. Right, so at the end of turn 9 then, it's all getting a little bit messy. That there's a Russian unit here that's captured 1 prisoner, so they've got this prisoner here, and there's a Chechen unit here that's taken the 4 tank crew prisoner. I've decided what I'm going to do is take away, now that the prisoners are dependents, it doesn't matter whether they're wounded or whatever, they're not allowed to rejoin the game even if they're freed. So I'm going to take all these dice that apply to the prisoners away, leaving just 1 serious wound on that Russian unit. And we're going to play turn 10 then, just to see if these prisoners can be got off the table. If they can be returned to the Chechen lines, then they score massively. I think it's something like 12 victory points per figure. And there is also, of course, as all the Russians are now inactive other than this 1 unit, there are a lot of other Chechen units that might be able to get across the board to help the situation out. I don't know, we'll see how it goes. Right, this is going to be the initiative roll. It works out at 1 dice for the Russians and 4 for the... Actually, I don't think it does, you know, the Russians have only got 1 unit, and you get 1 per 2, and it's rounded down. So I think the Chechens are going to retain initiative for the rest of the game. Yeah, so we'll carry on like that. So with prisoners, you have to roll a troop quality dice to see if you can move at rapid speed. If not, you have to move at tactical movement speed. So they fail, so they can only move 6 inches. So they have moved 6 inches, and across the other side of the table, all the other Chechen units are pulling back now, and they're going to try and make their way over to this side of the table as well. And it's now up to the Russian player to pursue, see if they can catch up. So let's see if they can make a rapid movement. No, they can't, so they can only move 6 inches as well. So there they are in hot pursuit. They could open fire on this unit, but they risk hitting one of their own side. So I'm going to leave them in pursuit for the time being, see what happens. So we're on to the next turn now. Chechens have the initiative from now on, so they're going to roll a troop quality test to see if they can move at rapid speed. I'll do that on this bit of table here, save a bit of time. And they get a 4, yeah, so they can move at 12 inches. There they are, they're virtually off the table edge there. And for the sake of speed, I've moved all the other units. There's 1 seriously wounded figure there, but they all diced and were able to move at rapid speed. So they're approaching this side. And it's now all down to what these guys can do. Whatever happens, they're going to have to open fire and try and wipe out this unit here, because in the next turn they'll be off the table. So let's see how far they can move. They fail, so they can only move 6 inches, so they're going to move to about here and then open fire on those guys. Right, so they're outside of 8 inches, so they're outside of optimum range, and the Chechens can return fire, they can react, so there's a reaction test to see who fires first out of the 2. So the Russians fire first, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 figures, but one of them is seriously wounded. So they only have 5 combat effective figures. They have a heavy support weapon, which is normally worth 3, but because they moved, that loses 2 of its dice. They get 1 for that, 1 for the SAW, and that's it. And you only count the combat effective figures in that Chechen unit, so they've got 3 figures in it, so you don't count the casualties or anything like that. So they get a defensive 3. They're allowed to assume that they're taking the advantage of the cover, and that's it. I mean, open ground and everything, no solid cover. Now, the Chechens we'll take those off, but I'm going to leave the failures on for the Russians. You'll see why in a moment. So there's 3 failures and 4 successes, one of which, oh, this is interesting, only one of which the Chechens can counter. Right, now the way you determine if one of the Russian tank crew, one of the prisoners, has been hit is if there are more failures than successes, one of the hits has to be on, if there has been a hit, and there has to be on the Russians. But as it happens, there's more successes than failures, so those 3 hits are all going to be on the Chechens, which means they are wiped out and can't return fire. So there is still, this is incredible, there's still a possibility that the Russians might now be released, rescued. Right, so there's the Chechen unit wiped out, so they're stalled just at the table edge, right on the brink. It's the next turn now then, so the Chechens still have the initiative, so I am going to move one of those units. In fact, they don't even need to move, do they? They can fire from behind that cover because it's low cover. So that unit there is going to fire on this unit here, and this unit will react and attempt to return fire. But if it does that, then it can't move towards that unit there. So, is it better off just to stand and receive the fire? I don't think that's very realistic, no, so it will have to react and return fire. So we do a reaction test first of all to see who fires first. And both fail, so because the Chechens are the initiative side, they get to fire first. So the Chechens have 6 figures. Some of them have light wounds, so that has no effect on the fire. They have a RPG and they haven't moved, and they have a SAW. The Russian unit has 5 figures that are combat effective, so they start with a base of 5. They have body armour. They're not behind cover, but they are able to take advantage of the terrain. Right, so again I'm going to leave any Chechen failures on the table. It doesn't look like there's many anyway, but I'll take the Russian failures off because there's a chance that that Chechen prisoner might be injured now. So there's 2 fails there and a fail there, so no, so he's going to be alright. Right, so the Chechens have got an 8, an 8, 2 6s, there's a 7 there as well, and a 4. So all the Russians can do is match up 6 there, another 6 there, that 4, and they can't counter any of those, so they take 3 hits, which means that they're only left with 2 combat effective figures. So we know the Chechen prisoner was alright, so they've got to take a morale test, and they passed the morale test, so they can now return fire. So the Russians now have 2 effective figures. We can describe one of those as the heavy support weapon, so they get 3 dice for that, and we can describe another one of those 2 as the light support weapon, the SAW. So the Chechens still have 6 figures who are fit and well, apart from light wounds, and they're behind cover because they're behind that hedge, and they can be in cover as well. And get rid of all the failures. Which there are many. So the Russians have scored a 4 and the Chechens have beaten it. So the Chechens don't suffer any casualties, but they do have to roll for morale because they're being fired on by a heavy support weapon. So they roll 6 d10s. Pass, 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 and pass. So they're 4 out of the 6 passes, so they're okay. Right, so that Chechen unit has fired on that unit and it's reacted, so it's not going to be able to do anything, and all the other Chechen units are racing across the table trying to get to this side, and they might be able to help out over here as well. So we're on to the next turn. I've lost track now, I think it might be turn 11. Okay, so the Chechens are going to start again with that unit firing on this unit and this Russian unit reacting. So the Chechens win. They have 6 figures, RPG and a support weapon, and the Russians now only have 2 combat effective figures, but they have got body armour and they can take advantage of the terrain. We can take off the Russian failures. They've done quite well, they've got 2 8s and a 4, but we need to keep the track of the Chechen failures just in case they hit their own prisoner, their own side, but they're not going to, they've only got 2 failures, so they're okay. Right, so the Russians can match that 8, they can match this 8 against anything. They're going to be wiped out basically because they're 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think we can safely call that the end of the game because that's the last Russian unit and they are now wiped out. So that 3 is increased by 4 to 7, but that's overkill, so we'll put it on a 6 for the number of figures in the unit. And what that means is the Russians can't do anything at all now. They made a brave, valiant attempt to get to their prisoners, but what will happen over the course of time is that these units will get round here, reach this unit, perform first aid on the figures that are there, and then they're off the table, and there's absolutely nothing, there are no Russian units who can prevent that happening. So I won't string it out any longer, I'll call it an end to the game there. The Chechens have won by a mile, because I think for every figure they can take off the table, I think they get 12 points, and the only points that the Russians got were for 3 points from neutralising that hotspot. So it's 48 to 3. So I think that was quite a good demo. Most of the simple kind of mechanics came up in the course of the game. The only thing that I remember didn't happen was that no one attempted to cross this hazardous pile of collapsed apartment block here. But the mechanism for doing that is very similar to crossing a minefield. You roll for troop quality, and if you fail, it inflicts injuries on you, and the apartment block, you roll 4d8s firepower. For the minefield it was only 3. So it's a slightly more hazardous terrain to cross, but other than that, and you can only move at 6 inches across it, you can't make rapid movement across it. It's no different from the minefield. So that's my favourite set of modern combat wargame rules. You can play so many different theatres of war, so many different scenarios. It's never ending, really, and it's a great shame that Osprey kind of abandoned it. I think the trouble is that Osprey have got a very kind of hard marketing approach, and they wanted to standardise the format of all their wargames rules, and control what kind of rules came out, by which I mean what periods, and so on. And I think Ambush Alley just found it a little bit too high pressure in the end, and were in a way quite relieved when their contract with Osprey ended, because they were able to relax a little bit and weren't pressed into producing regular supplements for the rules. But to my mind, they are a superlative set of rules because they're so flexible. You can bring so many different things into them. There's lots in there that I didn't show you, all kinds of things, drones and armoured vehicles, IEDs, anything you can think of you can pick a rule for. So I'll call it a day rather than carry on waffling. Hope you enjoyed, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.